I would like to start by thanking ICD Berlin and in particular Mr. Mark Donfried for giving me the chance to be here to address you. To start with, the term cultural diplomacy was not familiar to me, and I do not think it's a familiar term in many parts of our Arab world. Usually, we understand diplomacy as restricted to those working in the foreign service, at foreign ministries, by diplomats and ambassadors. And without going into wording or semantics, I believe that such diplomacy, particularly the non-official one, is badly needed nowadays among Arab states or between Arabs and other countries and cultures, particularly at these tough times when misunderstandings abound because of many reasons that have to do with religious extremism, misconceptions, stereotypes, migration, wars, and most importantly, bias and lack of depth on behalf of the media. And it is because of these factors that we need to work for having more understanding of each other as cultures, as peoples, as adherents of different faiths and neighbors, and as partners in one common future. As Arabs, we have to have such interaction among ourselves, the same as we have to have it with other people and other parts of the world. Here, I would like to remind you that when we talk about the Arab world, we have to realize that it is not a homogeneous region. It is diverse politically, religiously, linguistically, and culturally, to the degree that we have substantial differences, political rivalries, and raging wars now taking place, whether in battlefields or through other means. Some of these battles are taking place over who actually represents Islam, its culture and values. Here, as I mentioned Islam, I would like to remind you that the Arab world is a smaller part of the Muslim world. There are 22 countries that are members of the Arab League. And all these countries are members of the wider Organization of Islamic Conference, which has 56 member states. In terms of population, the Arab world has a population of 422 million people. The wider Islamic world has 1.6 billion people who constitute around 22% of the world population, meaning that in this world, out of every 4 or 5 people, there is one Muslim. And we have to keep in mind that not all Arabs are Muslim, as there are millions of Christian Arabs, but who share with their fellow Muslim compatriots the same identity, culture, and values. And in terms of race, Arabs are not one race, but rather a racial mixture. Although they are considered Semitic people who originated from Arabia, their spread north, south, east, and west of the peninsula throughout history meant that they have managed to mingle with and to incorporate other ethnicities and races, a fact that helped to contribute to the richness of their culture, leading them to live in diverse multi-ethnic societies, some of which later on came on to be described as Arab. This diversity helped Arabs mingle with people from other cultures, as merchants, students, migrants, and scholars. Even as invaders, they managed to mix with the people they conquered and to come up with unique cultures. In many places that they did not turn into Arab, they left their religious mark, converting large areas in Asia, Africa, and Europe to Islam, which naturally carried with it some traits of the Arab culture. So for these and other reasons, Arab culture has always been characterized by diversity, openness, and pluralism. But this diversity, as it is spread over wide areas of the world, has not been homogeneous as mentioned earlier, or as some would have loved to believe. And as there is a lot of common ground between Arabs, there are differences that we and others need to recognize and understand, despite the fact that discussing such issues is considered taboo in some parts of the Arab world, particularly when it comes to Islamic religion. There are major ideological differences of the Muslim faith, mainly between followers of the Sunni and the Shiite sects, and even among followers of the sects themselves. With the Arab world, the majority of the Arab population is Sunni, and the battle to lead the Sunni population is fierce. And due to the absence of democratic culture in the Arab world, it is not only a battle to win hearts and minds of the others through the proper, peaceful, democratic means. Unfortunately, it has turned into violent confrontations in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Libya, and elsewhere, and turned into blind terrorism threatening others in many parts of the world. So we have a messy situation that clearly demonstrates the lack of agreement on a unified perspective of what is Arab and Islamic culture and consequently agreed upon culture. And unfortunately, instead of having proper cultural messages to disseminate to the rest of the world, we have a small minority that spreads messages of hate. Our fragmentation and weakness are contributing factors to this minority's relative success in creating rifts between us and the rest of the world. Indeed, it's a bleak picture that we have to recognize. It's a picture that did not exist a few years earlier, but it is the one that now grabs the media's attention and focus. In spite of all of this, we hope that this picture will change and that the media would focus on the other full half of the glass. This media has to know that radicals and terrorists do not represent us, nor they represent our moderate faith, nor our culture. To the contrary, they have been targeting us, and all that stand for us in the worst manner possible. We hope that this episode in history would come to an end soon. Our history is much longer than these few years or decades. We are the descendants and inheritors of all civilizations, whose artifacts and archaeological sites testify to our great contribution to human civilization. We left our marks in fields such as arts, chemistry, music, literature, medicine, math, astronomy, architecture, and many others. We preserved great literary masterpieces of other civilizations, including European ones during the Dark Ages. It is true that it is mostly history, but it is our history, and it is an integral part of our identity and culture that should be the counter-narrative to that used by forces of darkness. After all, they are a minority, and they should not be made to win. They dwell on our failure, our inability to take the initiative, and the lack of light at the end of the tunnel for millions of youths in our region, and even beyond, including those who identify with our culture and are living in countries around the world, including here in Europe. These youths need to have the promise of a better future, a promise that the defeats of the past would be overcome and would not be repeated. Of these biggest defeats that we have received were the 1916 Sykes-Picot Treaty between France and Britain that divided the Arab world into the statelets that we know today, and it was intended to make it easier for the colonial powers to rule the Arab world. And of these defeats, we have the Palestinian question that is the result of the world wars and the problems that started here in Europe in the beginning of last century. So these and other historical developments helped poison our relations with the West and are used up till nowadays as ammunition in the hands of radical elements. We have to know that and to try to overcome these challenges and to look to the future knowing that we and the West, particularly here in Europe, are two neighboring regions that have common interests and challenges, that share a lot of history, and which share a common future together. To succeed, we have to do our homework properly at the official level as well as at the grassroots level. At the official level, state-to-state relations are always described as good, but that is not enough. At the grassroots level, people have always proved that they can live together in peace and harmony if left alone, away from political and religious powers trying to plant seeds of harmony, disharmony and disunity among them. There remains a need always to sideline radical voices by amplifying voices of moderation and reason. And indeed, these voices calling for and even practicing love, peace, harmony, and coexistence are here around us. They are the majority, but maybe they are not being heard well enough because of the noises of war, of terror and bloodshed that is taking the limelight at the current time. These voices have to be supported and amplified and to have to be given the chance to lead the masses. These are the ones capable of breaking walls of fear and suspicion, to replace them with bridges of friendship and cooperation. Now, the terror attacks taking place in our part of the world and elsewhere prove that our battle is won, and that we have to continue working together to defeat our common enemy. And this cannot be done without the efforts of people like you gathered here to discuss how to maximize cooperation, increase cultural exchanges, and overcome barriers. I pay tribute to your efforts and wish you and ICD Berlin and its partners the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barhoum, for your very interesting speech. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have questions, comment? I'm coming.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Barhoum. Thank you very much for your interesting speech. My name is Dan Erhardt, an intern here from Croatia. And I wanted to know that you were saying that it's a common battle of all of us against a common enemy. However, within the Arab world, we can see that there are very differing views in the battle for terrorism. And what do you think could be an element of unity? Because as we've seen, there's a big, big gap between, for example, the countries of the Gulf and the countries that are more near to Europe in the Arab world that have different views on this combating terrorism. What could be a common element that could unite them together in a common position? Thank you.
This is a very good question, and it's a follow-up to a session that I attended yesterday that addressed how to do it through education. And in these brief moments, we cannot answer. This is a big dilemma that in the Arab world that we have been discussing for a few years, since the beginning of the Arab Spring and even before, since 2001 terror attacks in the US. Now we need to come together to define what, to the roots of the issue, to agree that first of all, Islam is a religion of moderation, and the voices that are calling for disunity, for bloodshed, for war, are a minority. Now, the political issue in the Arab world is not being addressed properly, unfortunately, because of the disunity among Arab parties. I believe a few days ago, 2 days ago, we had an Arab summit taking place in Mauritania with little news being heard about it. It's because of the Arab countries are not in agreement on what to do and how to do it to fight terror. So it's not an easy question. We have a lot of homework to do back home and to do with our partners here in Europe and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, I'm coming.
Hello, I'm Laura, and I'm also an intern here at ICT. So, starting from the assumption that Arab countries are much different to the European ones, especially politically speaking, do you see any possibility for the Arab League to become more similar to the European Union? And to what extent could that possibly help solve conflicts and even defeat terrorism, maybe? Thank you.
I don't see that happening in the near future, and it's because of the inability of the official Arab world to rise up to the situation. At the grassroots level, I believe the public are much more successful in bridging the gaps, in coming together. At the official level, I don't see any hope, unfortunately.
Mr. Barhoum, hello.
Mr. Abbas, yeah.
Congratulations on your brilliant editorship of the Times in Jordan. I actually lived in Jordan. I studied my high school there in a boarding school. And one thing, that is commonly known about Jordanians is that they never smile. And now that I've lived there, I can say, well, how can you smile if you have Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Israel, on all these conflicts on your borders? So my question is, how do you think Jordan survived so far? And how long can it still remain stable, given all these challenges, the spillover from Syria, the ever, deluding peace process in Palestine and Israel, and the conflict every few months, the situation in Iraq. How confident are you that Jordan can continue to survive as it did so far?
Mr. Abbas, thank you. I am very optimistic that in Jordan we will continue to counter the regional challenges. They are grave, indeed very grave. They are bigger than the size of Jordan. But since 100 years almost, when Jordan was established, we managed to do so. The secret is the unity of the Jordanian people. We come together at times of hardship under the leadership of the country. It's not easy to infiltrate Jordanians as is what's happening now in other countries of the region. Now, the political rivalries now pitting the superpowers of the region against each other, and the proxy wars that are being played in smaller Arab countries, this is a big issue for us. We do not want any foreign regional or non-regional interference in the affairs of other countries. We have red lines in Jordan that we do not allow any foreign powers to practice any political role in our country. And thank God that our people realize that. They realize that our unity is the best defense against regional turmoil.
Excuse me. I'm Fadi Khalaf. I'm Lebanese Secretary General of the Arab Federation of Exchanges. Also, I would like to give my opinion about and ask you about the stability not only in Jordan but in Lebanon. You might think that in Jordan the stability has always been there because the unity of the population. But I've had, and we were asking a lot about why we are still, like in Lebanon and Jordan, so stable while we are surrounded by all this fire around us. And all people were saying we have a kind of international umbrella leading to this stability in those two countries. And recently we realized that this stability is coming especially because we are hosting the refugees from Syria. And I remember what Mr. Stefan Meyer answered a certain question yesterday or the day before yesterday when he said someone asked him, instead of treating the refugees problem in German, why aren't you doing any effort to solve the solution in Syria? He said it's a problem of American, Russian, Saudi, Iranian problem, which is difficult to solve. But we think, this is what he said, that we can solve the problem of refugees in Germany by making them living better where they are now, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and other countries. It means that our countries now, they have this umbrella to have this peace, and I might talk about Lebanese. You know Lebanese, they can fight at any time. Those days, they are forbidden to fight each other. Why? Because if they fight, if you have any problem in Lebanon or in Jordan, we have 1,840,000 refugees. It's not 1,050,000 because legally they are registered 1.5 million, but we have non-legal, so we reach like 1,840,000 refugees. You have in Jordan million. In case we have any problem in those two countries, I think that those 2 or 3 million refugees in those countries from Syria will go to Europe. And this is why we are still under this umbrella of peace. This is mainly why we have it.
Thank you. I don't want to comment. I pray to God that the peace would continue in Lebanon, in Jordan, and would prevail in other Arab countries, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya. We want to always work for peace in Jordan, and we hope that even as Arab countries, we would be able to work for peace around our region, first of all. Thank you.
And there was a report that Israel and Jordan, they want to dig a canal parallel to Suez Canal, and it will be connecting Dead Sea with the Red Sea. So how it will affect on Suez Canal, and how it will affect on your relation with Egyptian people, not the government. So I want to ask this.
Thank you for this question, because this issue has raised some controversy in Egypt because it was misunderstood. This canal is not similar to the Suez Canal. It's mostly going to be tunnels under land, and this is to serve ecological purposes and survival issues in the region. Ecological purposes, to start with, the Dead Sea is dying now. It's retracting at the rate of 1 meter per year, and in a few years' time, if we leave it like that, it will disappear soon. So we have to get water to it. There was an initial Israeli plan to dig water to it from the Mediterranean, but it proved to be very difficult. The easier way is to do it from the Red Canal to the Dead Sea to revive this lake. The Dead Sea is a lake. It's not a sea as the term might imply. And the other reason also to use the water that is being pumped from the Red Sea to generate electricity and to desalinate water. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth. It's 400 meters above under sea level. 400 meters, that means the water pumped from the Red Sea would be used to generate a good amount of energy to desalinate potable water for Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. So it's a regional cooperation scheme that would not affect nor compete with the Suez Canal. It's a different scheme. No. No, as I mentioned, the Dead Sea is 400 meters below sea level. So there would be no canal in the world that can take ships up and down 400 meters above mountains. And if we also know the topography of the region, the Dead Sea, 400 meters, and you have also almost 1,000 meters of mountains in the Jerusalem and Ramallah area. So it's almost 1,400 meters. It's not going to be easy for any ships to cross unless if this water is done through a canal system. I don't know. But anyway, this canal will never be navigable.